November 1950, over the Yalu River. An American F-80 pilot glances up and sees something that shouldn't exist. A swept-wing fighter climbing faster than anything on a NATO drawing board. In that instant, the West learns the Iron Curtain has jets too, and nothing in the sky will ever feel safe again. Today, we count every Soviet and Russian fighter, interceptor, and bomber built to make NATO pilots sweat. 38 machines. From a crude jet stitched together with stolen German engines to a stealth fighter still fighting sanctions just to reach the runway. Stick around, because at the end I'm revealing the full threat index. And the jet NATO feared most isn't the fastest one on this list. We start with the panic years. The MiG-9 was the Soviet Union's first jet fighter, built by jamming captured German BMW turbojets into a straight-wing airframe. It was clumsy, dangerous to fly, and its own 37mm nose cannon choked the engines on firing. Then came the shock. The MiG-15 used a copied British Rolls-Royce engine to stun American pilots over Korea. At just 5 tons, it outclimbed and outturned every early Western jet, and with over 18,000 built, it remains the most produced military jet aircraft in history. The MiG-17 sharpened the formula, its tighter wing sweep delaying the sound barrier's drag. It couldn't break Mach 1 in level flight, but a decade later its agility let North Vietnamese pilots outturn far heavier American Phantoms. The MiG-19 rushed the Soviets into supersonic flight, a twin-engine interceptor so dangerous to its own pilots that engine fires and unpredictable handling became routine. And the MiG-21 became the AK-47 of the skies. Simple, cheap, brutally reliable, exported to 60 countries, with no real radar of its own. It survived entirely on ground control instead. Then the doctrine split. Some jets chased pure speed. The Su-7 was basically a giant turbojet wrapped in a minimal fuselage. It hit Mach 2 but burned fuel so fast it could barely reach the front line and make it home. The Su-9 gave up guns entirely for 4 early air-to-air missiles, a manned rocket whose only job was intercepting American nuclear bombers before they reached Soviet cities. The Su-11 was nearly identical but carried a bulged nose for a heavier radar. Better target lock. But landing speeds that were already dangerously high got worse. And then the giants arrived. The Tu-128 remains the largest interceptor ever built, a 43-ton twin-engine monster patrolling the frozen Siberian frontier, carrying 4 massive missiles built for one purpose, shooting down American B-52s over the Arctic Ocean. The Su-15 earned a darker reputation, a Mach 2.1 interceptor remembered for shooting down Korean Airlines Flight 007 after it strayed into Soviet airspace. For 3 decades, it was the backbone of Soviet air defense. Here's where things get genuinely frightening. The MiG-25 was built from heavy nickel steel because aluminum would have melted from friction at its top speed. At over 3,000 kilometers per hour, it burned so much fuel and material that engines had to be completely overhauled after every high-speed intercept. NATO was so terrified of it that an entire fighter program, the F-15, was redesigned around beating it, before anyone realized the Foxbat's true limits. Its successor, the MiG-31, is a flying radar station, cruising at Mach 2.8 with a phased array radar tracking 24 targets at once and firing hypersonic R-37 missiles to kill aircraft from 400 kilometers away. It doesn't dogfight, it doesn't need to. For getting into a fight fast, the Soviets built swing wings. The MiG-23 replaced the MiG-21 with beyond visual range capability. Pilots swept the wings forward to launch from short, bombed-out runways, then swept them back for Mach 2.3 sprints. The MiG-27 stripped out that complex radar to save weight and reshaped the nose for ground attack, carrying a brutal 30mm rotary cannon built to shred NATO tank columns. The Su-17 took an outdated design and bolted on swing outer wings, transforming a failed interceptor into a wildly successful, widely exported ground attack jet. And the Su-24 was the Soviet answer to the F-111. A side-by-side crew, terrain-following radar hugging the ground in the dark, hauling 8 tons of tactical bombs behind enemy lines. Now for the jets that actually earned NATO's respect. The Su-27 flanker was built specifically to beat the American F-15, a 30-ton aerodynamic masterpiece with massive internal fuel and thrust vectoring, famous for the Cobra maneuver, an abrupt vertical rearing motion designed to break enemy radar locks in an instant. The Su-30 added a second seat for a weapons officer since ground attack missions overwhelmed a single pilot, and at roughly $40 million a unit, it became one of Russia's biggest export success stories. The Su-33 got folding wings and reinforced landing gear to launch off a carrier's ski jump deck, serving as a heavy naval fleet defender, and the Su-35 dropped the canards but packed in massive 14,500-kilogram thrust engines and the Irbis radar, the deadliest non-stealth fighter in the Russian arsenal, built to fight NATO jets at extreme range. Down at the front line, things got personal. The MiG-29 was built to fly off rough dirt strips right behind the battlefield, and it carried a helmet-mounted sight that let pilots lock onto enemy jets just by looking at them. A technology that genuinely shocked NATO when it surfaced in the 1990s. The MiG-29K shrank the airframe for carrier operations, and it's now the primary carrier jet for both the Indian and Russian navies. The MiG-35 modernized everything with fly-by-wire controls and AESA radar. But despite heavy marketing as an affordable 4.5 generation fighter, it struggled to find buyers in an export market the Su-30 already owns. For the mud in the trenches, the Su-25 is the Soviet answer to the A-10. The pilot sits inside a welded titanium bathtub built to absorb heavy ground fire while the jet flies low and slow, shredding trenches and tanks with rockets and a 30mm cannon. The Yak-130 is a fast, twin-engine jet trainer that doubles as a cheap, effective light attack aircraft for smaller air forces fighting insurgencies. And then there's the strange one, the Yak-38, the Soviet Union's first operational vertical takeoff jet, using a bizarre setup of two lift engines up front and a swiveling main engine at the rear. It had a horrifying accident rate and could barely carry a useful payload. Its successor, the Yak-141, actually broke the sound barrier in level flight after taking off vertically. The program died with the Soviet Union, but Lockheed Martin reportedly bought the swiveling nozzle data to help shape the F-35. The bombers are where Soviet doctrine turns genuinely nuclear. The Il-28 was an early, reliable twin-engine tactical bomber with a glass nose for the bombardier. Over 6,000 were built, and they dropped bombs from the Middle East to Vietnam. The Tu-16 entered service in 1954 to carry nuclear bombs toward Europe, and heavily upgraded Chinese copies still fly today. The Tu-22 was a supersonic failure recognizable by its two tail-mounted engines, blisteringly fast, brutally hard to fly, with an ejection seat that fired the pilot downward, turning low-altitude bailouts into a death sentence. Its replacement, the Tu-22M, is a completely redesigned swing-wing bomber hitting Mach 1.8, built to fire massive Kh-22 cruise missiles from hundreds of kilometers away and sink American aircraft carriers before the Navy could react. The Tu-95 is the loudest aircraft on Earth. Four massive contra-rotating turboprops whose propeller tips move faster than sound, generating a continuous sonic boom, and it still regularly probes NATO airspace just to test response times. And the Tu-160 is the largest and heaviest combat aircraft ever built, a 275-ton swing-wing monster cruising at Mach 2, flying to the edge of enemy airspace, launching nuclear-capable cruise missiles, and turning for home before interceptors ever arrive. Two experiments never made it to war. The Su-47 was a forward-swept-wing technology demonstrator offering extreme agility at low speeds and high angles of attack, but its composite wings buckled under structural stress and it stayed purely experimental. The MiG-1.44 was a fifth-generation delta-wing fighter with canards designed in the 1980s to counter the American F-22. The Soviet economic collapse killed its funding after only a handful of test flights. Which brings us to today's real threats. The Su-57 is Russia's operational stealth fighter, prioritizing maneuverability and sensor fusion over pure radar invisibility, packing side-facing radars and 3D thrust vectoring to outturn anything in the sky. The Su-75 checkmate is the export hope, a single-engine, affordable stealth fighter unveiled to compete with the F-35 on the world market, though international sanctions have kept it from its first flight. And the S-70 Okhotnik is a 20-ton stealth flying-wing drone acting as a loyal wingman for the Su-57, carrying heavy bombs deep into contested airspace while a human pilot commands it from a safe distance. 38 machines. From the mass-produced simplicity of the MiG-21 to the sheer intimidating scale of the Tu-160. So which one actually terrified NATO the most? Not the fastest. The MiG-25's speed record turned out to be a dead end once pilots realized what it cost to fly. And Western intelligence spent nearly a decade overestimating it before a defector finally handed one over for inspection. Not the biggest either. The Tu-160 impresses on a runway, but a bomber that size announces itself long before it ever arrives. The real answer is the MiG-29's helmet sight, because it rewrote close-range combat rules overnight, and NATO had no immediate counter sitting in any cockpit in Western Europe. That single piece of gear forced entire air forces to redesign their training within a few short years. Soviet and Russian aviation never bothered building beautiful aircraft. They built industrial machines engineered to survive the harshest conditions on Earth, prioritizing speed, thrust, and survival above everything else. And that philosophy explains almost every strange decision on this list. The crude cockpits, the brutal ejection systems, the sheer disposability of the early designs. That's every Soviet and Russian fighter jet ever built to make NATO pilots nervous. And if you want the full threat index breakdown, ranked machine by machine, that's coming in the next video.